Today I'll be talking about the marketing performance of my specific corporation, which is Cardiovascular Systems Inc., ticker number CSII. And then I will be comparing it with two similar firms, which is Medtronic and BSX, which is Boston Scientific. And Medtronic's ticker number is MDT. So first I'll be talking about CSII's accounting findings, and what I did is I split them up between accounting and marketing. So my first five ratios are what I deem accounting findings. And what I found by pulling the 10Q off the SEC filing from Yahoo Finance was that the revenue that they made was $44,461. Their gross profit was $35,736, and they're actually been operating at a net loss for the past year or two, which I found really interesting because with a company that brings in revenue, and this revenue poll is the most current. It's from third quarter because their fiscal year end is actually June 30th. So this quarter alone, they made $44,000, which is a lot less than their two competitors, but they're operating at almost half their half of their revenue at a loss, which is crazy to me because I just don't see how that's not profitable. And why this is because their expenses are so high that their expenses this quarter alone were $42,000. So their return on sales is then quite low in the negative, and then the return on assets is also low and in the negative. Now, this compared to Medtronic and Boston Scientific's accounting findings were pretty interesting to me because Medtronic and Boston Scientific are both in the millions, where Cardiovascular Systems is in the thousands. So the revenue for Medtronic is $600 and $934 million. Their gross profit is $355 million. Net profit is $1,095 million. And then the return on sales is actually positive at 16%. And their ROA is also positive, which is good to see. You don't really want a negative ROA. And then similarly, with Boston Scientific, they're working at a profit, and it's a lot better than working at a loss. But you can see how these companies are big, and Boston Scientific is actually pulled from their either third quarter or first quarter. I couldn't quite find it for March 31st, and that's their 10Q. And then Medtronic hasn't filed their either first quarter, second quarter, third quarter 10Q, so I actually went back to the 10K, and that's where I pulled these numbers from. From the 10Q for net income as of January 31st. So they have their first quarter's findings. So now we'll go on to the market findings for cardiovascular systems. And what I found is that their marketing cost per unit is $485, which is quite high compared to what you'll see with Medtronic and Boston Scientific. And then their net sales contribution was also quite high, where Medtronic and Boston Scientific's were almost negative. And then their marketing growth, I couldn't quite figure out if we were supposed to do the marketing growth rate or just a simple marketing growth. So what I did is this 102,764 is actually the change between the first year when they started and then 2016, and that's pulled from their 10K that I saw, and that's actually quite a big difference from where they started to where they are now. Their marketing share is 0%, and it's not quite zero, it's just a low enough number because the only industry revenue that I could find was $36.79 million. And with their sales, there's nothing close to $36.79 million. And the $36.79 million is TTM, so it's a total of 12 months. So it's a quite large number. So their 0% isn't quite 0%, it's just low enough that you can round down. And then their segment profitability is 0.81. So now if we'll go on to Medtronic and Boston Scientific's market findings, we'll see that their marketing costs per units are both quite small compared to what CSI was, because I can't explain why, but at least I know that part of this is from the expenses, and their SG&A expenses are so high that it's affecting all of these calculations and ratios. So now you go down to net sales contribution, and those actually are both negative. But their market growth, you can see that Medtronic's market growth is larger than Boston Scientific's market growth, which is kind of crazy because Boston Scientific, compared to this, would be the market leader in their segment and in their industry. And their industry is medical, like their segment is healthcare, and then their industry is like medical equipment. And so they're a leader in their industry. So that is what I found for all my ratios and all of my findings with CSI as my starter company, and then their two competitors, Medtronic and Boston Scientific. And I just want to point out that it was really interesting to me how cardiovascular systems can compete with these larger companies and not tank, essentially, because they have such a big portion of the market. If you were to get it out of TTM, then you would be able to see that Boston Scientific brings in large revenues and has a big hold on, the market, where cardiovascular systems based out of Minnesota doesn't bring in as many revenues. I also found that they're doing 8% layoff for their employees, so that could also be affecting, some of the revenues they're bringing in and things like that. And hopefully with that layoff, they'll be able to lower their SG&A expenses because those were quite high. To give you an example, they were at $42,338, but their cost of goods sold was only $8,725. And again, this was pulled from the 10Q month end of March, so their third quarter. And those numbers just seem too far away from each other to be considered, what they should be. Compared to, for example, like Medtronic's SG&A expense is only $2,317, and their cost of goods sold is $2,141. So those are a lot closer, which means they're expensing as much as they are kind of selling, and they bring in the revenue to offset it so that they'll operate at a net profit. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to seeing what more this semester has and what more we can dive into. Thank you so much.